Hello and welcome everyone to this week's episode of DOOP By the River, your I'm assuming second favorite Union podcast behind, every other one. Uh as you can tell, it's just me, Philly's number one bald host, aka Justin Friedberg. And we're gonna get into the New England the review and a Red Bull preview as we have a busy week this week, but stick around for another great episode of Duke by the River. Here we go, folks. Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Duke by the River. I'm your host for the moment, Justin Friedberg. And if the person to my right looks a little different, yes, it's not Johnny or Tim. It's my good buddy Mike Thomas. Mike, thanks for helping me out here.
Stuperos. Doing my best Johnny impression, but no, I will not be able to replace Johnny or Tim, unfortunately. So yeah, you're stuck with me tonight. Justin gave me a quick text a little while ago, and always happy to help out.
And trust me, I appreciate it, and it's gonna be an interesting episode, folks. So I hope you're prepared for whatever may come in this episode. PJ, Johnny is currently in Denver, and Tim needed a little Tim time. So I figured, you know what, we're still gonna do this. I'm still gonna hop on, and I through my influence in the Union Twitterverse, which is basically me sending texts and messages to everyone I know, and just saying, hey, does anyone want to hop on here? But Mike,
and against his better judgment, he landed on me somehow.
Yeah.
Or he texted 7 other people and then they all declined.
So basically, if it gets a little Ted Westervelde and our tinfoil hats come on, I apologize, everybody. It's gonna be an interesting time. Kata, Mike is not a PSN member, but he is essentially I'd like to say the honorary wild card in Union Twitterverse. If you need a hot take or a long rant about why the Union have either not signed the players they've needed, or just a long-winded conversation about anything, Mike is your guy. I will tell him that is Mike's wheelhouse here.
Yeah, I guess I'm Union super fan with way too many thoughts that I need to get out, and Twitter is my ventilation point. So I think Rich Laurie actually has this in his profile. One time I was like, I have all these ideas and my wife doesn't want to hear any of them, so I got to let them out somewhere, and that's usually on Twitter. So you guys can find me there.
Exactly, and it can get real interesting. But all right, so we do a second show this week because whenever there's 2 games, we like to kind of do a review of one game and a preview of another. Well, this time we get our favorite football stadium playing, rich owner having team. The New England Revolution came to town. This time we're not playing them 6 times. This is one of 3. This is one of 3 that are scheduled. I know it seems like we saw Bruce Arena way too much, and trust me, I'm not a fan of Bruce Arena, and I know a lot of people aren't either. 1-1 draw, which, can we all be honest, is kind of what you expected. That or a 1-goal game. I mean, that's how these games always are. But Mike, I want to start with the lineup. Not much changed from the Chicago game. Jack McGlynn gets his 2nd straight start, and which I'm glad to see that Jim is starting to really starting to trust the kids. And McGlynn seems to be the real beneficiary of this trusting the kids. And up top you had Sergio come in for Corey. Just on the lineup, before we really dive into the game, what did you think of the lineup? And was it really much of a surprise?
No, I don't know how surprising it is necessarily, at least a striker pairing, right? I think we all sort of assume Sergio and Casper are the first choice pairing, with Corey being sort of the off the bench guy that we saw last night. I do find it interesting that McGlynn is getting those starts on the left-hand side. And now, I mean, a lot of that's probably has to do with Brujo being suspended right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it does, and I put this out there the other day, or maybe it was yesterday, whatever. Besides the point, what does McGlynn getting the start over Fontana really mean for Anthony Fontana? I think that's an interesting question to have. I mean, maybe it's the case that, Montero is just so, until Gazdag gets here, maybe above and beyond the first choice number 10, and maybe McGlynn edges out Fontana as like a box-to-box 8 on that left-hand side. Maybe that's the case. But it is interesting to think Anthony isn't getting starts above McGlynn and not working his way into that lineup. That's my big takeaway and what I'll be watching moving forward. I know we saw him later in the game with a sub, and maybe we'll get into that in a bit. But yeah, from a lineups perspective, until Martinez is back, I think this is probably the direction that Jim's going to want to be going.
Yeah, I think, listen, I've talked about this before on the pod. The Gazdag signing is one of those that it really can be, it looks poorly on first people assume is Fontana. And I don't think it's so much of a real negative on Fontana. I think that being a super sub really is not a bad thing in this situation. But I think also people forget he is only 21. So, but he's the elder statesman of the homegrowns, which is crazy to think about it, that he's been here, 4 seasons, and like it's taken him really till last year to kind of get in. But the lineup didn't surprise me overall. I think given what you were expecting, given you had the game on Saturday against Red Bull, you knew there was going to be a minimal rotation. I think because you wanted to keep a similar lineup to what you had at Chicago, what worked well, and I think overall from the beginning of the game, it looked like a good lineup. Now on the New England side, based on what I could tell in the formation, it looked like a 4-2-3-1. Given that it was just Buxa up top, you had Buchanan on one wing and Taratsen. I was trying to get that Icelandic winger's name correctly, and you have Heel at the 10, and then what it looked like McNamara and Maciel, I think, was the other holding mid essentially. I mean, it looked like a 4-2-3-1 to me, Mike. I don't know if that looked different to you from the start of the game.
I think I probably saw the same that you saw. I'll be honest. I was much more focused on our guys than the formation New England was in. Whatever formation they were in, it really seemed to push our play to the right-hand side, at least from my perspective. And again, I don't have a refined soccer brain the way some of you guys do, but I noticed a lot of what we were trying to do was all going up through Mbaizo and Bedoya. And I mean, we mentioned Jack McGlynn earlier, and I mean, and even Wagner last night, I feel like they did not get many touches at all. And when they did, really could not get much forward out of that left wing.
Yeah, so we'll kind of transition into the game discussion. But yeah, I think in that first half, you started to see that it looked like that left wing was really shut down, because I think Buchanan did a great job of really pinning Wagner back because Tajon Buchanan is going to be a great player. I can feel it. Like he's already starting to be a huge contributor for New England. He's already getting caps for the Canadian senior team. Like he's starting to really push it for them. And I think whenever you have a winger with that kind of capability, it's going to pin Wagner back a bit. So even when they were really trying to push it up, I mean, you had Wagner putting it through to Flock. Flock was trying to get it to McGlynn, but even they were, essentially once they tried to get it up there, it was being cycled right back. And that was the thing. It was being cycled right back. And then you had Sergio, you had Casper dropping deeper, and Sergio essentially making those runs down the right-hand side. And the amount of times that Bizo or Bedoya would just throw that ball, and it worked against Atlanta and CCL. It worked against Chicago. You throw that ball up there, and Sergio's gonna run onto it, and you know that because Sergio's not a 90-minute player, so you can get that out of him for 65 minutes or so. I would say is the usual.
Yeah, man. And I mean, maybe a lot of it's a function of Bruce Arena and the Revs in general being so familiar with us and both teams being so familiar with each other, where they just play each other into stalemates. I mean, I honestly, until those last 10 minutes, I mean, that game was a total dud, like excitement wise. Like there was not much going on.
Yeah, I think you had what? You had Buxa forcing Blake into a save. You had Sergio doing a quick, the crossing from Bizo and forcing Turner into a quick reaction save. But really you had both teams making the sub at what? I think it was like the Union made the sub in like 65th minute. And then the Revolution throw on. We did a double sub. Was that the Fontana and Corey sub?
And Burke. Yeah.
And then you had on the New England side, you had the Teal Bunbury and Gustavo Bo, which was an interesting double sub. And I think I will say this, that Teal Bunbury to me is one of the most underrated forwards in the league. I think he's such a utility guy that does not get the respect he does. And he's been a bit of a journeyman. He's had some successful stops in KC, and he's been with the Revolution for a while. But people don't seem to realize that he's a pretty good player, and he scores the first goal. I mean, we saw it that you had, I believe it was DeJuan Jones, cuts it up after a 1-2. He plays it back, and Bunbury kind of, it looked like he was stretching for it. I mean, that goal, he slid basically on top of it. And I think if you look at Andre, he was definitely leaning. I think he wasn't expecting that, and I don't think anyone was. And all of a sudden, 85th minute, I mean, it was. I knew it was always going to be either a 1-goal game or a locked stalemate. And then when you have that 85th minute goal, you go, "Oh no!" Like this is going to be. This might be another home loss.
Oh yeah, and you saw it in the stands, right? A bunch of people just started leaving as soon as that goal went in, which is unfortunate because they missed the equalizer, which was pretty exciting. I mean, it was pretty close to a mass exodus when they let that goal in. It was very much a 2017 Union vibe of the meet for the exits.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, 85th minute, you wouldn't expect differently from the Union faithful. As much as I love our fans, it really doesn't surprise me. But yeah, 88th minute, you have the cross come in, and the ball, it's a free ball. Casper goes up for it, collides with Turner. He gets the ball first, so ref lets it play, and then the ball goes up. The ball's up in the air, and Casper essentially just powers through the defender. New England fails to clear, and Casper, bashes it in for a goal. And as excited as I was, I'm sure, Mike, it crossed your mind as well. My first thought was, oh no, is this going to be called back for a foul on Turner? Because, I mean, don't get me wrong, it was a fair play, but I could have easily easily seen that being called back.
Yeah, honestly, the way calls were going last night, I mean, I would not have been surprised to see that. I feel like it was not to harp much on the officials, right? Because I don't think they made or broke the game, right? Necessarily, we can argue about PK or no PKs on the two Casper balls, but the Union really weren't consistently putting themselves in a position to be putting goals away the way they should have. Now, right, should they have had a PK maybe on that second one? I don't know. Hard to judge, but I don't want to blame the officials too much. But it did feel like it got a little bit away from her at times.
Yeah, and I will say that second call, where Casper gets his legs taken out with no contact on the ball, seemed like an obvious one, but that actually leads to a great little segue. So Tori Penso was the center official. This was her first center assignment of the season, but fourth of her career. And if that last name sounds familiar, that's because her husband Chris is also an MLS ref. And listen, when Geiger retired, it's basically been a long list of officials now for Union fans to dislike. Nima Sagafi is definitely very, very high on that list. Just quote the Atlanta game where we got 2 red cards. I'm sure that will bring fun memories to everyone. But I thought that Tori, she didn't have her best game as a ref, but I think, and I said this to several people, she was equal for both teams. Like, okay, well, okay, yeah, we got more cards, but the calls themselves, in terms of the way she was calling the fouls, felt very even, and it really didn't hinder the Union, but it didn't really help them. And I always like to say, as long as the ref doesn't give, like, if she'd called a PK for the Revs on a situation where the Union didn't get that call, that would have been a clear advantage. And I would have been like, wait a minute, why didn't you call it that way? But I would say she didn't have her best performance. But overall, I thought that, like, as long as a ref keeps it consistent for both teams, I'm okay with that. What did you think of Tori Penso's performance?
Yeah, don't get me wrong. In the stadium, I'm booing like a crazy person and yelling and screaming, but that's as a fan, right? Honestly, anytime where we're pointing to officials as like the reason for all of our issues, I just think that's sort of lazy. It's very, very rarely solely on a referee that we lose a game or drop points or whatever, right? So, it is what it is. I agree with you. I think the calls were fairly even. We maybe got the short end of the stick on a few of them, just by nature of how we were playing last night. But yeah, I would look more at the team being tired, maybe our subs, specifically like Fontana and Corey coming in and not being as effective. We talked about Fontana being like in a super sub role. I'm not sure that he was necessarily deployed in the best position to be that super sub type player he was last year.
Because it looked like based on the way he was in as that left shoveler, right? Like, that's right. The way it looked to me when he came on the field.
That's what I saw as well, right? They definitely put him in on the left. I would have been more interested to see what he could have done at the tip of the diamond and maybe move Montero back to that left side at Shuttler role, where arguably you could say is Montero's strongest position anyway, and where Fontana is going to give you the most bang for your buck on that sub end. Corey, I always refer to Corey as like a big disruptor in front of the net. I didn't see as much of that as typical out of him last night in terms of just like a pure pressure on the goalie with his fresh legs that he usually gives. And maybe that's a nature of him being tired from playing that all those minutes in the Chicago game, right? And he's still coming off injury, right? So I mean, the team's tired. We're shorthanded without Elsinio and Martinez, right? I think there's a lot more valid excuses to point to than talking about the referee, right?
Yeah, no, and let's be honest here. Like, I definitely think Jim could have used more subs. I think, having Quinn Sullivan available, having Paxton. I mean, Paxton's been one where I mean, he's been in the 18 twice, I think.
Yeah, but Justin, here's the thing, though, right? You could complain about Jim using more subs, and he's got 5 of them, so that's even more for people to point to. But you got to be taking someone off to bring someone on, right? So, are you at that point? Are you taking off Bedoya for Sullivan? Is that getting you more incremental value? Are you taking off Flock for Paxton? And then what happens to your back line? Yeah, I mean, there's a very good chance if you pull Flock off, you're leaking goals to New England, right? So I don't know if it's as simple as saying, oh, we have these attacking pieces and attacking young homegrowns that quite honestly aren't proven at all yet are going to get you more value than keeping some of these would-be 90-minute starters anyway on the field.
Yeah, I think the only player that I think you could have given a little rest to, and I know this takes away from what was the goal, but at that point, Casper would have been before either goal, Casper would have been the guy that you would have been like, okay, let's give, let's have Corey up top. Let's bring in, Quinn, or let's bring in Paxton. Let's make it a 4-2-3-1, and let's try to like just keep some shape, but also give some youthful, fresh legs.
I don't know, though, but if you're chasing goals at that point, is switching to just Corey as your only true striker on the field the way to go? I'm not convinced. Not with the way the Union play.
Yeah, and like I said, that's why I kind of was like, okay, let's think about it, because it's one of those. There's always the trade-off with when you take the player off. It's who is your true striker? It's like, I mean, you had the same thing with New England when they brought on Bo and Bunbury. You knew very well they were still keeping their 4-2-3-1 shape. They were just going, okay, you're putting Bo out wide and you're putting Bunbury up top, and Teal created a lot of mismatches. I mean, also my key to either beating New England or getting that point was you have to stop Heel. You had to disrupt him. You have to make sure he doesn't influence the game. And is it crazy for me to say that I feel like outside of the goal, it felt like the Union at least not contained him, because I don't think they contained him at all. But I feel like they offset a lot of the damage that he could have done by, I mean, I think one by having Flock at the 6, because I think he was a little more tempered and in control as compared to Brujo. But I mean, that was the biggest thing was could you stop Heel? And to me, I would say they did it for the most part. I don't know if you thought differently on that, because Heel's a pretty influential player, and it's obvious when he makes his impact.
No, I agree. I mean, I think the Union defensively, I mean, aside from a goal, had a pretty decent night overall, right? I mean, the Revs didn't have many quality chances. I think Bizo may be somewhat of a concern defensively. And honestly, I'm not even entirely sold on him offensively. He has moments of brilliance, don't get me wrong. But there's also moments where he seems to not make the correct pass. I don't know. I'm a big Ray Gaddis fan, full disclosure. I feel like I'm missing that steadiness from Ray. And if I'm remembering correctly, I think Bizo may have been one of the guys beat on that goal from New England.
I think that was a combination of kind of that 1-2, and I think Bizo kind of does, and I love Ray. And trust me, don't get me wrong, I was always like, okay, I feel like as reliable as Ray was, we should have someone that contributes more in the offense. And Bizo is a massive step up on that offense. I think his off the ball ability and even his on the ball to be able to create that offense is huge. Now, defensively, yes, I will agree. He can be a little bit of a liability, but again, that was the issue. As good as Ray was defensively, I feel like I see some of the same issues with Bizo in that on that goal, Bizo was pinched in a little too tightly, and he was playing higher. He was trying to. I mean, they were playing a bit of a high line, but between him and Wagner, out of the two, outside backs, Bizo definitely was the higher of the two, and I think all you had to do. I mean, it was a 1-2, I believe, between Jones and Heel, and next thing you know, he's in all alone, and he squares that back to Teal Bunbury, who scores. And so I'll say defensively, I still have concerns about Bizo, but I feel like the offensive side of his game is too good to overlook. And as much as I loved Ray, I feel like Bizo brings that extra spark that we did not have on the right-hand side the last few years.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, Bizo at his best probably does bring more value. I think, and part of this may just be he's still such a young player. I think there's can be at times a lack of consistency, right? So I think there's just a little bit more fluctuation, a little bit more uncertainty around what you're going to get each game. But, as a young player, I'm sure he's going to work that out over time.
Yeah, and
he had moments of brilliance last night too with some of those passes and
oh my god, I will say one of the things that I think Bizo does really well is, I said it before, it was his off the ball movement and his ability to 1-2, usually with Bedoya, sometimes with Casper, Jamiro, whoever goes to that side. But I will say one of his best qualities is his ability to hit that first time cross. Like, I know sometimes you could say, oh, he could take a touch and then cross it. Well, with the way that the wingers were settling in for New England, I mean, you have to get that cross in like that. And so I think my concern wasn't necessarily with the way his one-time crosses. It was, and I've said this before, he had some great crosses in there. It's just no one was there really to meet the end of those. And sometimes because I think that's why at times you saw him cutting that ball back, and whoever was the tracking runner. And I think that's okay to cut that back, but you really should have at least one of your two strikers making a near post run, one on the far run, and because Bizo definitely appears to be able to cut a ball in, and he also appears to be able to play one a little of a lofting ball. So that's my concern, and I hope that against Red Bull that we've seen how they can play. We've seen what we can do against them. I'm curious about how Bizo is going to look in that setup, given what we're going to be really talking about in a team that at this point are pretty two similar styles, if I could say, which is a perfect segue onto the Red Bull preview. So the Pink Cows from North Jersey, New York, however you want to play it, are coming down to the Sub on Saturday, 7:30 game time. Before we have our guests show up, Mike, do we expect much of a lineup change for this game? I mean, I know Brujo's not going to be back, but there are going to be questions as to whether, I mean, obviously it's always who's your starting strikers, and outside of Leon and Bedoya, who makes up your midfield diamond?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only potential change we would see would be maybe McGlynn going back out to the bench. And I don't necessarily know who fills in there. Maybe there's the potential for Flack to move back out to the left side, and maybe we can move potentially Elliott up to center defensive mid, and maybe we see Findlay start in the back. I don't know where he is right now in the pecking order, right? He hasn't really seen the field yet. Or I suppose there's the chance we could see one of our other homegrowns and Craig potentially playing at center defensive mid, but that may be a big ask for a young kid. I'm not sure about that.
All right, and I'm gonna say it. So, joining us today is, and I have a little blurb that he sent me. So I'm gonna try to say this all correctly. Co-host of the EPL Boys Pod, Red Bull writer for the MLS Aces Pod, which we had Tom on for the NYCFC preview, Viking Army Empire supporters member, and someone who has unfortunately come on to the Union Happy Hour and taken the abuse, and he seemed to enjoy himself. So I'll let him get the adulation that I'm sure he's going to receive from the DOOP by the River faithful. And I said, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. It's Matt Sy from Post and Pints. Matt, thanks for joining us.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. And you got my last name right. So you are in like the top 1 of 1%, because usually when people see my name, they think any other name besides how it's actually pronounced. So
welcome.
Amen.
Yeah, and trust me, I as someone who has a last name that many people mispronounce, that's why I had to confirm with you, because let's be honest, when I asked your last name and I said Sia, like the artist, I'm like I was like, huh, interesting.
That's how everyone usually goes with it. It's funny enough. So I play a little soccer myself as well. And one day we were just playing against random guys who were on the same field as us, and they happened to be Italian. My father is also Italian, but just as far away from Italian as possible, like lost way along the, people coming over to the United States and whatnot. And he looked at, and I told him my last name. He goes, "No, you're saying it wrong." And I was like, "What do you mean I'm saying my last name wrong?" They're like, "No, it's Chia." And I was like, wait, have I been saying my last name wrong this entire time? I've gone almost 30 years of living on this earth, and I've been saying my last name wrong. It was a little bit of a shell shocker, but I stuck with it. My wife took the name, so she, same thing as well. She always gets asked, because she's a teacher. She's just like, "How do you pronounce your last name?" She's like, "I'm just Mrs. CIA. Just leave it as Mrs. CIA."
With Chia, did you ask him if like the Chia pet, pouring water on your head and you're supposed to grow?
Oh, I'm telling you right now, because back in, I think, middle school, my hair grows out really curly. So I had the fro for a few years. That was my nickname through middle school, junior high. So I got sick and tired of it. So one day I just shaved my head, and I was like, "You can't make this joke now."
But all right, so Matt, before we get into a little bit of about how Red Bull are playing and some of their standout stars, I'm going to
booze in the chat from PJ.
From PJ, respect to the Metro Stars scarf, though. I will say that I am a big I was a big fan of the Metro Stars logo back in the day, but bringing it a little more current these days, Matt. Red Bulls this year appear to be playing pretty well. I mean, you've started to really get into it. You have wins, in the last few games. You're starting to really look well. Outside of Caden Clark, because everyone knows who Caden Clark is, and everyone knows the rumors that he's probably going to Leipzig next year. Who really to you has been standing out on this team, and who was a bit of a shock that many people might not know in terms of really producing so far early in the season?
I mean, right off the bat, yeah, Caden Clark. I mean, everything about this kid is fantastic. Everything about Caden Clark, like from the second he stepped on the pitch last year, and especially last year with how the season was going, everything, Chris Armas losing his job, the entire up and down of the season. I mean, the Red Bull were in a dark place last year, a very dark place. And there was a little bit of that hesitation of not making the playoffs for the first time in a decade. That is something that a lot of people still forget. And they always remember right as the playoffs start, they're like, oh, the Red Bull have made it 11 straight years. And even Red Bull fans sometimes have to turn around and go, oh yeah, we have been in the playoffs 11 straight years. That's pretty nice. So, no, but that kid was a huge, huge reason why we got over the line last year. But getting into this season, with the new coach, the new head of sport, everything going on with the Red Bull this year, the Red Bull have brought in 11 new players to this team this year. Now, as a Red Bull fan, I don't know what that is, because the Red Bull don't sign people. The Red Bull are linked with a bunch of people, but they never sign anyone. So this year, the fact that we were linked to someone on a Tuesday and then they signed on Friday was scary to us, because usually we go 2 months linked with someone, and then 2 days before the season starts, okay, we sign them, and that's the one guy we get. So it's been absolutely massive. Definitely a name that's popped off the list for me is Andrew Gutman, someone we got on loan this last year from Atlanta. He's been actually kind of jumping around here there, but where he's come in, the wingback position for the Red Bull has been very, very, especially on that side of the ball. Kyle Duncan's done an absolutely incredible job on the right side, and he seems to be the guy going forward. He's going to get his U.S. men's caps, but Andrew Gutman, oh my God, this guy is an absolute warrior on that side. He's able to push forward, deliver in amazing crosses, and he has the know-it-all to get back and track back properly on defense so that the center backs aren't left all by themselves. I'd like to compare him something to a Liverpool's Andrew Robertson, someone who is crafty going forward, is able to put in a good ball, but has the work rate to get back and play defense. He's been immediately a huge cult fall. If people follow their cult players here or there, they can do no wrong. There's nothing this guy hasn't done he's done everything correct since stepping on the field. And some of his just overall, even in the press, talking about how the Red Bull are going to jam the ball, high press down your throat, 10 yards outside your own goal. What's not to love about this guy? He's been here for 10 minutes and he's already a fan favorite.
That is true. And the one player, I mean, there's one player that I know Union fans will love that I bring up, but the player first that I'm going to bring up made a big deal about his move, Frankie Amaya. I mean, that was a huge move, getting for almost $1 million in allocation money. And I mean, Red Bull definitely was not remotely on the list of teams that I thought were gonna go after Amaya. I mean, it was basically West Coast, which everyone was like Galaxy, LAFC, or even the Union got linked, and I was like, do we really want to pay $1 million for a guy in league who hasn't essentially shown what he's capable of? But I mean, what's your early impressions of Amaya? Because it appears that he's playing as an attacking mid in your system, which is really the first time he's been played at his preferred position.
So, again, this is nothing against FC Cincinnati, but I struggle to see any one of the better players in the MLS working there. They're still a team, a brand new team, and unfortunately, when this team was promoted, created, however you want to describe it, they're a team that never had a structure, never had a game plan. They finally have a coach in a system, but he's still trying to work in what players he wants and what players he doesn't. And Frankie Amaya being that #1 overall draft pick, there was a lot of pressure on his shoulders. And honestly, it just never worked out. And that was the unfortunate part. But I think the Red Bull, first of all, the Red Bull were linked to him. Again, he's one of those players where we were linked to him on a Friday and he signed the following Thursday. And when this went off, Red Bull Nation, everyone a part of the New York Red Bull fan base, went crazy. This was a signing where like, wait, what? This is a big deal. And honestly, from the second he stepped on the field, it seems that Gerhard Struber has figured out a perfect place to put him. And it seems that we actually run a quite similar formation to what you guys do, a back four, a nice diamond in the middle with a 2-striker system that helps push that high press. We needed someone next to Caden Clark because Christian Caceres Jr. and Sean Davis are going to do the dirty work, but they're not able to push forward. And we really didn't have another midfielder on this lineup that could help Caden Clark go forward, which is huge. Now that you have someone next to Caden Clark, it gives him the ability to push forward and get himself in much better positions. So that's not only going to make Frankie Amaya better because now you're dragging defenders away from him. You're giving him that room. But then at the same time, now Caden Clark has the ability to go wherever he wants. And it's been proven. You can see Caden Clark is not afraid to just pull up from 30 yards out and he'll put it on net. Frankie Amaya having these pieces around him is only going to make him a world better. And honestly, we cannot lie. Even seeing those tapes in Cincinnati, this guy hustles. This guy does not stop moving. He keeps running full 90 minutes. Hasn't had that opportunity yet to go the full 90. It seems that Gerhard Struber is doing an absolutely incredible job rotating players where he needs to rotate them. But having someone like Frankie Amaya in that diamond really helping out Caden Clark, it's going to make those two young stars all stars in the near future.
And let's be honest, Caden Clark appears to be a human Golazzo machine because it feels like every other week he's putting in bangers and putting his name up for MLS goal of the week. But I mean, yeah, you can't beat that. Now the other name that I'm going to bring up, and I know Mike knows exactly the name I'm bringing up. It's very, very short-term Union goalie and now Red Bull goalie Carlos Miguel Coronel. When Union fans, when we saw his name coming back to the MLS, we knew who it was going to be through, given the Red Bull network. Matt, I mean, what's your reaction? Because goalie, since Luis Robles, goalie has been a revolving door, and it feels like every time you think you have someone now, it's just they're moving on, and you got to wonder, like, do you believe that Cornell is your real? Because so far, I mean, through the early season, he has started most of the games. So, do you think he's the guy?
So one of the big things Gerhard Struber's doing this year is half of those new players brought in are on loan. And yes, a good chunk of the loanies are from other Red Bull teams, so that always helps because basically it's taking money out of your left pocket and putting it in your right pocket. That's how I like to describe it. That's how I describe the Tyler Adams deal. Literally, Tyler Adams was Red Bull, Leipzig taking money out of their left pocket and just sliding it into their right pocket. And it's like, this all works. But overall, yeah, it's exactly as you describe it. Luis Robles is going to go down as probably the most influential player in Red Bull history. And yes, I am putting him in the same conversation as Thierry Henry and Bradley Wright Phillips. Luis Robles was a staple, a fan favorite from day one, someone who would do whatever it takes to get the result we needed to get. And honestly, as a goal, and especially just as a goalkeeper, just an absolute aggressive, you guys have used it in the past on your podcast, a killer's attitude. He's a guy who's just very much like it. Trust me, I would not want to be a defender in front of Luis Robles because if you mess up, the whole stadium knows you messed up. But yeah, he leaves for Inter Miami. Again, a lot of fans still don't agree with that departure, but that's a conversation for another time. But yes, last year it was the time for Ryan Mira, someone who is young and, he's because a lot of people forget this guy is still in his mid-20s. This guy's been with the Red Bulls now for what has to be over a decade.
I would say forever at this point.
Yeah, but unfortunately, just inconsistency, and he just, in my opinion, I love Ryan Mira. I've had a couple conversations with him. He's an absolutely great guy, loves the club, bleeds the colors, but just never was that guy. Always a bridesmaid, never a bride, unfortunately, for Ryan Mira. And that's why last year Chris Armas brought in Chris Jensen from overseas. Now, coming in already right off the bat, you're spending, I think it was something roughly around almost $1 million as well, where basically now you have two guys going for it. The problem with what Chris Armas did was he never gave the number one spot officially to someone. He basically would start Ryan Mira this day. Chris Jensen would get 2 games. Ryan Mira would get another start. And the problem is there was an inconsistency. So now you have an inconsistency in the back line because they don't know who they're trusting as their goalkeeper, depending on who they're playing. Last year, that was one of the biggest downfalls for the Red Bull, is that inconsistency in net. So the fact that Gerhard Struber's coming in, the 11 new guys on the roster, and one of them is a goalie, you knew he was going with this guy from day one. It was already right off the bat, the way he was talking about it, this guy is going to start. And honestly, I had the opportunity to go to a behind doors friendly where they played against DC about a week before the season started. This guy right off the bat, it's a huge positive that the first thing you do when you come to a new club is walk over to the what few supporters were allowed in the stadium and like basically salute and clap them because we're already, okay, this guy sees us. That's a huge respect thing. And then he made like 3 back-to-back-to-back saves, like 3 separate back-to-back-to-back saves. And okay, my hands were up. I looked at my one buddy. I was like, that's the guy. That's the guy. Okay, he's going to do it. And honestly, he's been great. He's linked up extremely well with the back line. It seems that not Chris Armas. It seems that Gerhard Struber's really going with the back 4 of Gutman, Long, Nealis, and Duncan. And it seems that those back 4 with the new goalie have built this big chemistry already so early, really not having that many defensive mistakes, and everyone seems to be on the same game plan. I don't see this being a problem. I see this being a huge solution to what was a big problem last year.
Yeah, and there's no concern about, taking up an international spot on a player like this. I know you guys have the history with Frank Roast the way we have the history with Rice and Boley, right? So I know Union fans were a little gun-shy, actually, when he was on our roster taking up that spot. Not to say he's definitely a serviceable MLS keeper. I think we would all agree with that, Justin. He just got stuck behind Andre Blake when he was here. So I mean, is there any trepidation around just MLS roster crazy nonsense, or not really? Just you needed that steady piece.
And honestly, that's what it was. With the new coach coming in, and I think when you're a new coach, especially someone who's coached in the championship in England, and then you have to come over here and learn all these new roster rules, there's probably things on the plane over that he was reading like, why is that a rule? Like, are you serious? What is this? The 1940s in England when we're trying to get into the championship? Like, what is this? But yeah, I think this was one of those things where this year, more than anything, Gerhard is just laying down the foundation. He's laying down who he wants to build this team on. Because this is a guy who he's already talked about being here for a very, very, very long time. So as a fan base, we're not just a stepping stone to this guy. We're the destination. I mean, honestly, when Jesse Marsch was here, we knew. We knew without him having to tell us, like we knew his game plan. Because with the way he talked, he was talking way bigger than the MLS, especially when he joined the Red Bull. Aggressive town hall meetings be damned. We knew this guy was going to go somewhere. And especially, let's never forget, we're playing against you guys on the final day, the 2 weeks before the final day, we're traveling to you. Halfway through the game, Jesse Marsch has to leave for a flight to Europe so he can take his international coaching test. And we finished that, like, I'll never forget that game because it's like the 50-something minute, and you just see Jesse Marsch just run into the tunnel, and all the traveling fans are like, where the hell is he going? And then he never came back, and we're like, oh, this is probably not good for us. So, yeah, I mean, overall, I think he's just trying to do whatever he needs to do to build the foundation. And honestly, so far, I have 0 complaints. The entire starting 11 has been completely readjusted. I mean, there's only a few consistent guys from last year, and this is wonderful because honestly, for a Red Bull, we've been saying we've been in a rebuild now for 2-3 years, but this is the first time I've actually seen an actual rebuild happen.
True. So one last thing before we go into kind of previewing the game and getting our predictions. How concerned are you about the striker core for this team? I mean, I've seen the games and it seems like a lot of the goals are coming from your midfield, which is not a bad thing. I think given Caden Clark, given Frankie Amaya, you have the creativity to create those goals. And the service appears to be there from Duncan and Gutman. Like the service is clearly there. I've watched a lot of the highlights, and there is not a lack of crosses coming in, but it doesn't feel like there's a lot of production. And I know we talked about, with goaltenders when Luis Robles left. Well, ever since Bradley Wright Phillips left, it feels like there is a giant 99 hole in that striker core that has tried to be replicated, but just doesn't feel like it's been filled. How worried are you about what appears to be a lack of goals from your forward position?
And that's 100% right. Last year was basically the rotating pendulum of, do you want Tom Barlow to not score goals today, or do you want Brian White to not score goals today? Because that's what you got as a Red Bull fan. It's unfortunate. And honestly, I love Tom Barlow, great guy. Brian White is, again, I think just a little bit more of the inconsistent one. I think with Tom Barlow, you're just going to get a guy who's going to run around like he has a chicken without its head. Basically, he's just going to run around and try to cause hell. And I just feel like Brian White is someone who puts in the work, but I feel like gets discouraged very easily. Like if it's not coming to him early in the game, I feel like he puts his head down a little too quickly. And when you're a striker, you can't be like that. You have to have your head up, because whether you're making an impact in the first minute or the 90th plus 2 minute, like you need to be there full energy, ready to finish when you have the opportunity. And exactly it. Who wants to follow Joe Rogan on a stand-up special? Who wants to be the guy to go on after Joe Rogan? No one wants to be the guy to go after Joe Rogan. So when Bradley Wright Phillips left, and again, similar situation with Luis Robles, I'm not getting into it. Basically, they let Bradley Wright Phillips go without signing any permanent solution. And that was always going to be the Red Bulls' big problem is I'll bring it up right. I'm a huge Manchester United fan as well. I'll bring it right up to Cristiano Ronaldo. You let Cristiano Ronaldo go to Real Madrid and you sign Antonio Valencia. Yeah, that's good. That's just good. That problem's just going to solve itself. Yeah, we're good. But that's it. Bringing on a guy like Fabio from the Brazilian league is absolutely massive, because this is a guy who not only has the pace, has the height that keeps up with what Gerhard Struber's trying to do. Again, he wants to apply that high press. So he needs a guy who's not afraid to chase after every ball on the back line. And Fabio seems to be that guy. But so far, Fabio, not on the goal sheet yet, but is leading the MLS in assists. His hold-up play is phenomenal. He's able to get that ball way deep in the offensive side of the ball, and that's when he's able to pick his head up and actually feed someone. And that's where all those goals in the midfield are coming from, is from great hold-up play from Fabio, which is honestly something I think they should use to their advantage against this Philadelphia Union side. The other thing, though, is it's always his partner. That's been the only inconsistent part. They're playing a two-striker system, but the problem is one game it's Brian White, one game it's Tom Barlow, and it's just not working on either one of those guys yet. But the Red Bull also, again, another one of these new players. I can't stop talking about all the new players. They got this guy, a young Polish striker from Celtic, Patrick Kilima. I'm probably mispronouncing his name because I haven't heard it yet, but he was practicing with the team for the first time the other day. He is already the guy on the roster making the most amount of money per week. So this guy is already coming in young. This guy, again, and watching his highlight tape, he's an exact replica of Fabio. He's got good height on him. He's fast. He's got a ton of pace on him, and he has a work engine. So there seems to be a type of player that Struber is trying to go for, and it's these big, tall brutes who have engines that don't stop. And honestly, if we can get a good pairing next to Fabio has clearly shown that he's able to distribute the ball very well at that number 9 position. If you're able to put someone next to him, a guy who really just wants to finish, guy who wants to just put his laces behind the ball and just kill it, it seems to be this Patrick guy. And I'm telling you right now, I don't know if he's going to get playing time, being the fact that he just landed only a few days ago and practiced for the first time. But in the upcoming weeks, it's going to be something I'm really excited to see, because if you can get a partnership between these two, that's when the MLS kind of has to start looking at the red side of New York and going, I don't know, I think they might got something over there that maybe we want to just keep a bit of an eye on.
And that perfectly leads into preview. Obviously, Red Bull is coming down 95 and coming down to the Sub. What do you think? Because Mike and I talked about, we kind of know what the Union are probably going to put out as a lineup. I mean, the striker pairing is usually a Casper and Sergio, Casper and Corey. Like, there doesn't much change there. Usually it's okay, who's rotating in the midfield. What do you see any real lineup changes for this game? And what do you think? Because we all know that the last few years, and it the Union have had the Red Bull's numbers, and it was the flip side for a few years before that. Like, it seems to be flipping, back and forth. What do you think is going to be the key, with I maybe a similar lineup to Red Bull establishing? Because, I mean, essentially you have two teams playing very identical systems. So there's going to be a lot of high pressing, a lot of running around the field. Is it just going to cancel itself out, or what do you think is going to be the key for Red Bull to maybe pull one out?
So, I mean, right off the bat, it's 100% like what you said. I mean, these are two teams with basically the same formation, with basically the same game plan. They're both going to high press each other. They're both going to really try to make the other one make the mistake. So it's really going to come down to who has to alter their game plan first. Who is the one who's like, my system's not working, I got to try something different. And sometimes that'll work for you, sometimes that won't. Sometimes that'll backfire against you. This year, a team that matched up to us very similarly was the LA Galaxy. And what was a little bit confusing with us was that was the only game this year Struber came out with a back 5. He came out with a back 5, didn't have Kyle Duncan playing. Really, it was just an unorthodox style from what we've had for the other 3 games this year. And we looked horrible. We looked absolutely horrible. Chicharito scored a hat trick in that game, found every little hole he could possibly find. Outside of that, in the Kansas City game I bring up, we had the back 4. It was 2 goals in 3 minutes. It was literally a penalty and a goal right off of the kickoff where our defenders were sleeping. Those were the only bad parts of that game. So outside of that, the Red Bull have only been bad in little stints. But the last 2 games, we've had basically the same lineup. Right through the bat, you have the back 4 of Gutman, Long, Nealis, Duncan. Then you have Sean Davis, CCJ, you got Amaya, and you have Caden Clark, Wonder Kid. And then you have Fabio rotating next to whatever striker Struber decides to throw out that game. So really, it's probably going to be that lineup. I mean, honestly, I'm not going to put my paycheck on it, but I'd have to hope that it is that lineup, because that is our best lineup. But the best part about the Red Bull, which I've heard from seeing on Union, you did mention I happened to jump on that one day on the Union Zoom call, and I became friends with a lot of Union fans. So you guys are great, by the way. You guys are I love you guys. I love you guys so much. And I see sometimes maybe the substitutes, you're not getting enough substitutes on the field. You're not getting a lot of, the rotation isn't all the way there. With the Red Bull, that's where it's a little bit different, because the Red Bull now have depth out of nowhere. Like, we have guys now. A lot of people forget, for the past 2 or 3 years, Danny Royer has been our number 1 contributor on anything offensively. I haven't mentioned him once in our starting lineup because the guy doesn't start anymore. Struber realizes he can't get more than 30, 45 minutes out of Danny Royer. But you know what? He uses that to his advantage. He brings him on in the 50th minute, the 55th minute. And then this guy just runs around and causes hell, and he's one of our best offensive players. He's a huge X factor. We have Cameron Harper, another young U.S. men's national team player we picked up from Celtic this offseason. This guy is going to be something special. There's a lot of positive coming off of the bench, and I think that's what will give the Red Bull a little bit of an X factor going into this game. But these are two teams that respect each other a lot. I know Jim Curtin respects what the Red Bull do, and I already know Struber definitely has done his homework on Jim Curtin. Trust me, there will be handshakes after this game. Let's go with that. There will be handshakes, okay? I'd like to say no time wasting, but God, we haven't gotten there yet. But we haven't time wasted yet this year. Let me go with that. When we were up 2-0 against Toronto last week, we weren't the ones time wasting. We were trying to get 2 or 3 more goals. So I'm just going to throw that into the universe. But I feel like this is a game where it's two opponents who respect each other. They understand when it comes down time to the end of the season, these are two teams that are going to, they know that they'll both be there in the playoffs. They both know that these two teams, we're going to see each other a few more times this year. This is probably a feel-out game. This is probably a lot of jabs. No one's going to throw the haymaker. I think it's a lot of jabbing back and forth. You probably won't see anyone take the big risk. But again, it's MLS soccer. I'm saying all this. I think it's going to be like a cagey draw, and I'm going to the final score is going to be 6-5. Someone's going to win. So, I mean, with the MLS, you can never put your money on it.
That is true. While the MLS can be a bit of a wild card, I feel like we said with New England, you kind of know what you expect with certain matchups. And when it comes to a Union Red Bull matchup, there's going to be fireworks, whether they're on the field or off the field. I mean, as I say, one of the highlighting images we have is Jesse Marsch getting sent off in the Open Cup game. And, if you see it, if you see the close up, I am in the photo.
Oh, that's great.
I am pointing and shouting at Jesse. I cannot tell you what I probably said. It probably was something that is not safe for Mike's kids to hear, as I know they're running around in the back. So I know it was not very PG friendly, but that's how Union Red Bull always is. It's either a snooze fest of a draw, or it's as we jokingly call the El Sino game. You have firework of goals. Or we could call it the Marco Fabian game with with just the avalanche of goals.
I just want to say kindly that I still see El Sino ruining Connor Lade's entire career in my nightmares. Okay,
I will say, so fun little fact: Connor Lade is actually married to a girl that I went to high school with. That was in my accounting classes. So. Whatever, as you try to get, kind of somewhat semi-personal insults on the field, I used to always say, because sometimes it doesn't have to be an insult, it just has to be random. I just say, Connor, I knew your wife in high school. And I saw him one time look over and just go,
what?
And then remember that he's in Pennsylvania and that there's a good chance that there's people from Jersey who probably, and that's always a fun little fact I always like to throw out there. But all right, prediction time, because we are running a little on prediction time. Matt, I'll start with you. These are usually close games, but what do you think the final score is?
I think the depth of the Red Bulls bench might be the X factor in this game. I think it's going to be tight. I think it's going to be a 1-goal difference. I see the Red Bull losing their clean sheet streak, but I see them taking a 2-1 victory on the road.
To say should be expected from having a Red Bull person on would not expect differently.
If you look at my Twitter name, it's optimistic Red Bull supporter. So I got to be optimistic. Okay.
That is more optimistic than most Union fans would be. Mike, what do you think? I mean, we've been talking about this for an hour, and it feels like the amount of time we played Red Bull, we know how these games usually go. What do you think? Because I mean, Matt's right. Red Bull appear to be a slightly different team, even with the same system. They appear to have a little different. compared to last?
You know, I think Red Bull looked really good this year, to be honest. And I'm a little bit down on the Union at the moment. I'm going to wave that Negadelphia flag a little bit. You know, between the Martinez suspension, which I think is going to continue to hurt us, between all the games, we're coming off midweek. You know, they're tired, they're injured. The depth isn't there right now. We got to figure out rotation in the midfield. But I won't go full negative. I think we're probably looking at another tie. Maybe some more goals, though, given to two high presses, maybe some open field counterattack goals from both teams. So I'll go 2-2.
Yeah, you know what? I've been outside of the I think I was right on the actually no, I was wrong on the Revolution. The only game I've been right was Chicago, because it's Chicago, and Chicago is as I'll pull up from AK Gaming, Fire are crap. Let's be honest. They are.
That's breaking news, by the way. That's breaking news.
Yeah, breaking news to anyone who has not watched the MLS since like 2018. Let's be honest. But you know, I agree with Mike. I definitely think I don't necessarily be Negadelphia, but I always try to be semi-realistic. And the way that, given the midweek, given that they're coming off of a massive congestion of games, and I did say that I felt like things would start to kind of turn around once they got through the CCL congestion. And now that you have the CCL semis in August, you have plenty of time to focus. And once this game on Saturday happens, you then have just over a week before your game at DC, and then you have Portland, and then you have a 2-week break. So I feel like this game might not be the game to rotate. I think that'll probably be next game. I think you're going to have a similar lineup. But like Mike said, I think it's going to be a little more high scoring. I'm going to go with the same scoreline as Mike, 2-2. I just think that both teams, whenever you have a high press, I mean, we've seen it, that, you know, I mean, and the big difference, I think, between this year and most years with the Red Bull is, in Red Bull pass, that high press would work great in the first half, and then around the 55th and 60th minute, you could see the rails coming, the wheels coming off. It just felt like they were losing steam, and then that's when the Union seemed to pounce. This year, it doesn't feel like the Red Bulls are really losing that steam, and at the same time, the Union look good, but I don't know if they're going to take as much advantage as they have in years past. So I really think it's going to be a draw, but I think it's going to be a high scoring draw, because I mean, you look at both teams right now. I mean, the Union have, you know, a -1 goal differential, giving up 5 and scoring 4. Not exactly, you know, barn burning, you know, defensive stats, but then you have Red Bull scoring 7 and giving up 5. So both teams have given up the same amount of goals. So really, I think it's going to be a similar game, and I mean, both teams have pretty decent defenses. So I think this might be more high scoring than most Union Red Bull games are. But I definitely think 2-2, and I think we just both kind of, you know, it's going to be a knockout, drag out, ugly fight. Both teams lick their wounds, and they focus on next week. But Matt, before we have you off, anything you'd like to plug? Anything you'd like to promote?
I mean, you said it in the intro, so I greatly appreciate it. Yes, I am a part of a trio for what is the EPL Boys podcast. So it's 2 Liverpool fans and myself, a Manchester United fan, breaking down all of the latest in English Premier League banter. We just have way too much fun, and honestly, it just becomes casual conversation on just how, like, we just keep going back and forth. Imagine Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville just back and forth with each other. That's us 3 for an hour and a half twice a week. So you'll get a lot of good laughs. And my boy JD, who is also, I'm going to give him a shout out. My boy JD, huge Union fan. So me and him go at it all the time in the podcast. There's a lot of times it starts with Liverpool United and then turns into Union versus Red Bull. So a lot of fun with that. as well, you said I have recently this season have become a contributor for the MLS Aces podcast on their blog page. I write exclusively New York Red Bull, U.S. Men's National, and U.S. Women's National stuff. I'm looking to do more USL stuff. So all about the baby bowls, baby. USL, let's go. I can see it now. Let's get it done. And then, that's really it. Guys, I can't thank you enough for having me on. I wish you guys the best of luck over the weekend. By best of luck, I mean, I hope you guys look really good losing to the Red Bull this weekend.
Well, Matt, we appreciate you coming on, and hey, if you wanna hop in Union Happy Hour on Friday, I'm sure we'll be glad to potentially hurl some more abuse.
After the score lines I just give, I think I'm going to skip this week.
Yeah. But Matt, like I said, I do appreciate you coming on. Mike, I appreciate you helping me out here with Johnny in Colorado and Tim out. It was me scrambling to find some real help, but I do appreciate you coming on to help me out here.
No, it was a blast. I mean, I'd be listening anyway, so why not? Instead of talking to myself as I listen to the podcast, now I can chime in on my own and tell you why you're wrong, Justin.
And that's what I like to hear. Everyone, you can find this on Johnny's YouTube page on Episode Philly. This will also be everywhere you can stream podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you listen. It'll be on the PSN radio feed, and it'll be on the DOOP By the River account. I thank everyone who commented. We have a very faithful group of fans listening, and I always appreciate. And they didn't give you too much abuse, Matt. So I'd like to thank our fans. Our fans are appreciative that we try to bring on the opposition for every game, for every team as we can to do this. But I appreciate everyone coming on. Next week will probably be same time on Tuesday. But for myself, for Mike, and for Matt, this has been Doop by the River. Doop on, everyone, and we'll catch you next time.